Maseches Bava Kamma Daf Lamed Vav concludes the third parak of the Masechta Parak Hamanech and begins the fourth parak. So we have a brief sugya at the end of the third parak, and that's discussing a situation where you had two oxen belonging to the same person that attacked a third ox belonging to somebody else. The Gemara said that the nizik can collect from the mazik because even though we don't know which of the two oxen it was, it definitely belongs to this person, and he's the one that owes the money. So the Gemara discusses a Rava Mipar Ziko, said to Rav Ashi. So you see that what's the story if they're both a shar tam? Pasha says here they're both a shar tam, which means you can only pay megufay from one of them, but you don't know which one it is. So you can collect from either one, and if you lose one, you can collect from the other one. Now this is a question we had later, and the Gemara says you can determine it from here because it says you can collect from either one. So my answer is no. We're not talking about a shar tam. We're talking about where they are both muadin. Whereas if they're both mu'adin, then the next case in the Mishnah has a problem. There we read that if one of them is a large ox and one of them is a small ox, and the nizik and the mazik are arguing over which one it is. So I don't understand. If they're both mu'adin, what's the difference which ox is the one that gored? Either way, you have to pay the full value of the damage. Min aliyah. Nothing to do with which ox it is. So it makes no difference. So how does that case make sense? So Mara says that case must clearly be where it is... they're both tamin. But still the Gemara insists, no, the ratio, they're both muadin. The Gemara says, yeah, the first case they're both muadin, and the second case they are both tamin. Now, so Gemara says, Rav Acha Saba said to Rav Ashi, if the first case, the ratio, they're both muadin, then why does the Mishnah say that the oxen are chayavin? It should say that the owner is chayav, because it's min ha'aliyah, it's from all his property. It's not just that you take the money from the ox. Second of all, the Gemara says, what does it mean that shneihem? What does it say that they are both chayiv? It's not both chayiv. The ox is chayiv. The owner is chayiv, not the oxen at all. So the Gemara therefore reverts and says, no, really we're talking about where they are tamin. I have the tamin should prove the question that we had that you can collect from either one. So the Gemara says, no, it's not saying that you can collect from either one. It's referring to where both of them are in front of us. Therefore, they're both here. And therefore, the person has the right to collect from the owner. It doesn't matter which one it is. Now, this is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who says that when you collect, you take the actual ox. And therefore, as long as they're both in front of us, you could take the actual ox. However, if you lose one of the oxen, then you can't collect anything, because the owner could say the ox which is lost is the one that you were owed, and you have to prove otherwise. If you say that the ox which is here is the one that you were owed, or that you owed a part of, then you can collect. You have to prove that's the one it is. I say otherwise. It would be the other opinion, that of Rabbi Elazar, who says that you collect money to the value of the ox, not the ox itself, then it wouldn't make a difference if you have it in front of us. You don't have it in front of us. Either way, it's just a monetary obligation. Okay, this concludes the third parak. Now we begin the fourth parak, Shor Shenogach Arba V'Chamisha. The parak begins with the Mishnah discussing what happens if one shar gores a chain of other shvar. So let's say it gored 4 or 5 shvar, and it's a tam on all of them. Rashi explains how it's a tam on all of them. Rashi says that it saw other shvarim in between the 4 or 5 that it did attack, and it didn't gore these others in between, and there was no pattern to when it gored or when it didn't gore, or you would create a muad to gore every other one or something like that. But there was no pattern here, and that's a sugya which will be discussed later in the parak. So it did 4 or 5 without becoming a muad, so it's a tam for all of them, and it pays chatzin nezek mikufei for all of them. So how do you split it up amongst all the 4 or 5 mazikim? So the Mishnah brings 2 opinions. First is Rabbi Meir, who says the later mazikim are the ones who get more, and the earlier ones get less. And the way you work it is you pay full chatzi nezek to the last one, and if there's anything left over, you give it to the second to last. If there's anything left over in the migufay value of the shor, you give it to the third to last, and so on and so forth, going backwards. The later get more, and the earlier get less. So Rabbi Shimon says you do it as follows. You do it by halves. You split it again and again. So let's say the ox was worth 200, and it did a damage of 200. It gored another ox, which was worth 200, and the nevela was worth nothing, so the damage is at 200. It owes 100. So the halacha is, of course, the nizik and the mazik split it. They split the 200 the 200 zuz value of the shar hamazik. The mazik gets 100 and the nizik gets 100. Now let's say it goes and gores again. So we're holding here like Rabbi Akiva apparently, and the nizik and the mazik are partners. So they each are responsible to pay half of the damages of the next nizik. So they each pay half. The next nizik gets 100, and the first nizik and the owners split the cost, and they each have to give away half of their 100, so they each end up with 50. So of the 200 zuz value, the last nizik has 100, the first nizik and the original owner each have 50. Now let's say it's mazik again. Now all three are partners, and they all each have to give half. So the last nizik now, which is the third nizik by now, the third nizik will get 100. He'll take 50 from the second nizik, and 25 each from the first nizik and from the owners. And it continues along in that manner. And of course, you will end up with more for the later ones, and a continuing reducing amount for all the earlier ones. The Gemara now begins. The Gemara wants to know, does this Mishnah hold like the opinion of Rabbi Akiva or Rabbi Shmuel in the sugya of how do you view the sharing of the mazik and the nizik and the value of the shor hamazik? According to Rabbi Shmuel, you don't pay the actual cow, you just owe it. So the money is owed up to the value of the cow. The cow fully belongs to the mazik, just like it always did, and he owes up to half the value of the cow to the nizik. According to Rabbi Akiva, it actually becomes shared in ownership. They become partners in the ownership of the actual shor hamazik. 50% now belongs to the nizik, and 50% remains belonging to the mazik. So the Gemara says, let's analyze this Mishnah in light of this machlekes. If it would be Rabbi Shmuel, all the nizik has is a financial obligation. He's a bal chayv. That's true. Then the first nizik is a bal chayv first, and then the later ones are later, and then the later ones are later. So the full obligation should go to the first nizik, and then if there's anything left, it should go to the second, then to the third. It shouldn't be reversed. So why is it this way? The rule is always the first bal chayv collects first. His shibud existed before the later ones. So this mission is obviously not going to like Rabbi Shmuel. Now, if it's Rabbi Akiva, we have a different problem, is that since the cow is owned in partnership by the mazik and the first nizik, and then you have the hezek of the second, and so on and so forth. So why does it say that if there's extra, it goes back to the mazik, to the nizik before him? It shouldn't go back to nizik before him. It should go to everybody. Because when the last hezek happened, it was owned in partnership by all the mazikim, all the nizikin before him, as well as the mazik. So they should all split whatever money, whatever value is left evenly. Why should it go to the last nizik and then it should all go, whatever is left over in the value of the shar should go to the next to last nizik? Shouldn't be. He's an equal partner with everyone else. It should go to everyone else. So therefore it doesn't make sense. So we're stuck. Who is the Tana of this brisa of this Mishnah holding like? So Mara is gonna present a few answers. The Gemara's first answer is that it's really Rabbi Shmuel, who says that they are bali chavis, they're all owed. And the reason he goes to the last one first is because we're talking about where the last one grabbed it in order to collect from it. And what happened was as follows. The mazik held it, and then the first hezek happened, and the first nizik grabbed it. And then another hezek happened, and then the next nizik grabbed it from him. And then the next one grabbed from him, and they all grabbed from each other. So therefore, the last one is the one to grab last, and he therefore is the typhus, he's the muchsik now, so he collects. So the Gemara says, if that's true, then you have a different problem. Because when each one grabs it, they become a shemer sachar. They're holding onto the cow. They are fully responsible for the shmira of the cow. They grabbed it away from the previous owner. And they're getting schar for it because they're holding it in order to collect from it. They're becoming the muchsik. So therefore, they're shemer sachar. If they're shemer sachar, they're responsible for the hezek. The original owner is not responsible for the hezek. If so when the last person gets paid off his obligation, whatever's left in the value of the cow shouldn't go to the mazik to the nizik before him. That nizik was just a shemer, was posheh and his shmira. Instead, it should go back to the original owner, who this is being held from. Why does it go to the nizik before him and the nizik before him? The Gemara answer is no. This is what we mean when we say if there's extra, it goes back to the nizik before. We don't mean that there's extra in the value of the cow. We mean that there's extra in the cost of his hezek. So if the last hezek was fully paid off, the previous nizik's hezek is responsible to cover the hezek of the last one. I mean, whatever he got out of this cow, he now has to pay the last one. However, if his hezek was greater, then he still gets paid. So let's say the last hezek was 50 zuz, and the The second to last hezek was 75 zuz. So when the 50 zuz gets paid off, that comes directly out of the chelik of the second to last, but he had a chelik of 75, so he gets paid his extra 25. And if there's still the greater hezek to the one before him, he gets paid that also. Now, the lumnus of this answer is said by Rava. And Rabbi Yochanan also says this is the pshat. It's because of the pshia of the shaymerim that this whole sugya plays out. Gemara asks, if you're taining that this entire mission is Rabbi Shmuel, how do you understand the opinion of Rabbi Shimon? The opinion of Rabbi Shimon clearly only works as a partnership, because the whole reason that the last nizik gets paid in full, and the nizik before loses half his share, and the nizik before him loses half his share, as consecutive nizikins happen, is because each one is a part owner after his hezek, and he's now responsible for the hezek that comes afterwards. And that only makes sense if he's a shutuf. That only makes sense for Rabbi Kiva. So how are you telling me that the Reish is Rabbi Shmuel and the Seif is Rabbi Kiva? So Gemara says, yes, the Reish is Rabbi Shmuel, the Seif is Rabbi Kiva, and don't be bothered by that, because like we've seen quoted a number of times in this Masechta, Shmuel says Rabbi Yehuda, Shinana, sharp one, go out and don't worry about this Mishnah. The beginning is Rabbi Shmuel, and the end is Rabbi Kiva, and that's not a problem. The Gemara now brings in another sugya, which will relate to this. The Gemara quotes a Mishnah that says if somebody blows his friend, Rashi brings pshat that he actually blew on him, or that he gave him a blow, meaning he hit him. So he blows his friend. It's a machlekes how much he has to give him for the busha that he causes him. There's a fixed amount for that. According to the Tana Kamma, it's a salah, according to Yehuda, and then we're going to say, it's a moneh. Somebody has a case that happened where somebody actually did this. He blew or struck his friend, and Rav Tuvia Bar Masa sent him to Rav Yosef in order to collect this amount. Now Rashi explains it should be knas and chutzaretz. Rashi explains it's not. Either he was moide or something like that. So he asked him the question. He said a selab. He said, so which selab? There's two types of flying. There's a selab tzuri, and then there's a selab medina. Selab medina is 1/8 of a selab tzuri, and a selab medina comes out to be the exact size of half a dinar. Now the Gemara says his question was, is it a selab tzuri or a selab medina? The Gemara says, if you look in our Mishnah, you could prove that it must be a selab tzuri, not a selab medina. Why? Because what does the Mishnah say? It discusses the cases, according to Rabbi Shimon's opinion, it discusses the cases. It says, you had one hezek, so the owner gets 100, and the nizik gets 100. You had another hezek, the last nizik gets 100, and the two previous get 50. You had another nizik, the last one gets 100, the previous gets 50, and the two previous get 25. Now 25, we didn't say the number 25, we said a dinar zahav. The dinar zahav is worth 25 dinar kesef, and that's the valuation that we gave. Now that's where the Mishnah stops. The question is, why does the Mishnah say a step further? If there's another hezek, last one gets 100, next one gets 50, next one gets 25, and the last two get 12.5 each. The simple answer to that would be because we don't talk in halves. The problem is if you're going to use the coin of a selah and it's worth half a dinar, so we should say you get 12 dinar plus a selah. Then you're not talking in halves. So what's the problem? So the fact that we didn't say that proves we must be talking in terms of selah tzuri, and we're not talking about a selah medina, and therefore we can't use it. And therefore we're not going to talk in halves, which is why we didn't mention 12.5 dinar. The Gemara says that's not a raya. Could be that the tonnage is not going to keep on going like a peddler listing case after case. You got the idea with the number of examples that he gave. It doesn't have to keep on going. Now, the Gemara asks, what was the rest of the story? What happened with the situation where they were trying to figure out whether it was a Salat Suri or Salat Medina? So the Gemara says that they resolved it from a statement of Yehuda Marav. Any money mentioned al pidin the Torah as kasef tzuri, any money that we have an amount which is a dina derabonon is a kasef medina. So the case was, what happened there, that the guy said, since it's only half a zuz that you're going to give me, I don't want it, give it to the poor people. And then later he said, you know what, I'll take it, I'll use it to buy myself some food, make myself a little suda. So Rav Yosef is too late. Once you said give it to the poor people, we were already zeicha in it for the poor people. Rav Yosef was a gabbai tzedakah. And even though there are no actual poor people here, I was zeichet for them. And he is the Yad Aniyim. Like Rabbi Yehuda said, name of Shmuel, Yisoimim. Don't need to make a prosbol. If they owe money, they don't have to make a prosbol to give over the collection and the accounts receivable to the Beis Din. because the entire function of Puzbul is to give it over to a Beis Din, but the Yisraelim anyway are the Beis Din is responsible to handle their accounts as a public service. So therefore it's already given over to the Beis Din. Rabbi Kamma said the same halacha, Yisraelim don't have to make a Puzbul, it's already given over to the Beis Din. So too, the poor people, their property is already given over to the handling of the Beis Din, and we as the Beis Din, you've already given us the money, you can't take it back. Now, another incident that happened, the Gemara adds, that Rabban Gamliel and his Beis Din are the fathers of the orphans, fathers of Yisraelim. Now, another case happened with someone named Hanan Bisha, sounds like Hanan the bad guy, mentioned in some other Masachtas. He hit somebody, came to Rav Huna, he said, give him half a zuz. So he had a rubbed out one. So he wanted to give him that one. He didn't want to accept it. So he said, I'll give you a whole one. He didn't want to take that either. So he hit him again, and now he was able to give him the whole one because he had to give him the two halves.